The thing with Wayne's World is like the sketch was a sketch on SNL, and then what happened in the movie happened to me in real life. With the
Tia Carrera?
No, but she's friends of a friend. But that's just my life.
Welcome to Bitch Talk. I'm your host, Erin.
And I'm co-host Ange, a.k.a. Captain Party.
2026 brings us into our 13th year of podcasting, and we're proud to be here. Thank you to our followers and longtime listeners for voting us Best of the Bay Best Podcast for 3 years in a row, and to SF Film for adding us to the respected list of essential SF winners.
If this is your first time listening, where the hell have you been? But better late than never. We're like if the rap group Salt and Peppa met the show Grace and Frankie and had a baby. And if you don't understand what that means, ask Jeeves. And now, on with the show. Clink!
Welcome to Sundance 2026. Thank you to our festival sponsor, Standard Deviant Brewing. And in this episode, we've got Public Access and Seized.
Okay, Bitch Talkers, in this segment, we're going to talk about a documentary called Public Access. This is in the U.S. documentary competition of Sundance, and we're sitting down with two special guests. I'm going to have them introduce themselves to our audience so that you can recognize their voices. We'll start with our director.
Great. Yeah. Hi. I'm David Shadrack Smith, and I directed Public Access, which just had its premiere at Sundance 2026.
My name is Jake Fogelnest. I'm a professional, and I'm in the film Public Access. And you can also read about me online on the internet.
Very mysterious. Okay, David, can you introduce your film to our audience?
Public Access is a documentary told entirely through archival that takes us back to a kind of, we'll call it like the internet before the internet. It was this early experiment that started in New York City to open a channel, mandate to have a channel that anyone could make anything and have it broadcast across cable television and into your living room. And it was a radical idea. It was sort of born out of the 60s, this idea that more people should have access and more voices should be heard. It should be a civil right to have your ability to express yourself equally. And so from that beautiful utopian notion, a whole wild adventure unfolded that really affected so much of the world that we live in now from a media perspective. So yeah, the film just tells this story with these glorious people who made crazy things and put them out there, and what happened when those things landed in the real world.
I wanted to ask why, for both of you, why is the time now to talk about public access? Either David or Jake can talk about it. Why does it feel like it's necessary in this moment?
This particular story, I think, it's been bubbling under for a while. I started a public access show when I was 15 years old. It became sort of a cult phenomenon in New York City. It started out of my bedroom. And it was, if I was to pitch it to you now, it's not that great. It's not all that different than any YouTube streamer or a podcast or a Twitch. It was just me in my room talking about the things that I was interested in pop culture. And lots of people are doing this now, whether doing it in a quick message on social media or Facebook, or do people still use Facebook? Is that a relevant thing to bring up?
There's an age range of who's using Facebook now.
To Twitch to generating a prompt on Sora. People are always engaging with technology. And people have come to me and they've said, "Hey, you want to do a documentary about your life?" And I've been like, not so much. Because I've always thought of my story as a smaller part of a much larger story, which is Manhattan Public Access. And I think the reason why the film is happening at this particular time is because we're at this point now where we're asking lots of questions about how are we going to like interact with the media. And believe me, I see we have things from both sides. We've got both Andrew Callahan and Nick Shirley. Everything's going to be fine. Like both
I
sides
trust
are
you
covered.
when you say that. Yeah.
It's like, no, but like honestly, with all due respect to these guys, it's like two morons with cameras who are now journalists to young people. So quote unquote, but like they're doing numbers, and that's alarming.
Yeah.
Public access was a bunch of people in New York, trying to push for radical change, but at the same time they were doing a little pornography, and sometimes it takes a little pornography to get to the radical change, and that's an uncomfortable truth, and we don't have any answers, but we're just sort of laying out the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started thinking about making this, I grew up in New York City, and my experiences as a child watching public access, I think were, not that dissimilar to sort of flicking through a feed and going, whoa, what was that I just saw? And that kind of ephemeral moment passed. And, the parallels are so present, and the differences are also very important. When I started to make the film, I thought, okay, it's clear that there is a kind of foundational world to the world we're in now, and we just need to do the archaeology and find the stuff that I remember as a kid, and it feels like it has something to say to today. I think now that we just premiered, and it's a couple of years after I had that thought, it's for not all the reasons you want it to be, it's like even more relevant, it's even more in the conversation. How do we feel about spaces for open expression? How do we protect those spaces from forces that want to monetize or politicize or silence or co-opt? How do we find the limits? Because, should there be limits? And if there are limits, who gets to make those limits? These are all the questions that were raised on, public access at the time. Same kinds of responses, clutching pearls. Whoa, the world is ending. Kids will be harmed by watching this. There were efforts to shut it down. There were legal cases that eventually went all the way to the Supreme Court. They created laws and frameworks in the cable acts that are kind of precedential to the world we're in now. The difference between content and carriers is something that happened then. It happened around, the birth of that new technology. So there's this kind of like, wow, we've been here before. Those questions were asked and answered in a certain way, and we're here now, and we're asking those same questions. What did we do right then? What didn't we do right then? I certainly don't have answers, but we really wanted these questions to be back in people's minds. Thinking about the user and the tech and the platform and the technology and all the beautiful things that come out of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have any solutions. Like zero.
Yeah, no.
Oh no. We're here to solve
answer.
it.
More questions.
No, just
Lots of
asking the
questions.
question, I think, is important because obviously, the First Amendment is pretty great, but at the same time, there's some people that I don't like a lot of what a lot of people have to say, and what trickles down from that is, nasty and violent, and comes across your phone while you're watching your kid, and it's a bummer. Mm-hmm. It's a bummer, but at the same time, I want to be able to respond back to it.
Yeah, and what's the alternative?
Well, I like that you include that in your film. Even back in the beginning of public access, there were still assholes that, well, okay, for us, or, depending on where you stand and what your moral values and whatever, there were still assholes out there, but they had the right to share what they were thinking too.
Yeah.
But what I feel like is the difference is there was such a purity, a rawness to the public access versus what we see today as influencers in quotations.
That's so great. It's not performative.
Yeah.
When Al Goldstein
exactly.
is like, I'm a scumbag and I am, a pornographer, he really meant it.
I believe
He believed it, and he believed it to the point where he would fight it to the Supreme Court. As today, you have... It's almost the reverse of a performative male. You have a performative misogynist who's doing it to feed an algorithm and
to get power,
whatever
it is,
and money,
and maybe not even necessarily to get laid because who knows, they're weird. I don't know what's going on with the kids today, but it's a performance. You're right, and that is new.
And Jake, I call the first influencer. And it's
You're welcome, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
OG,
the OG. I mean, it's a model that, like, whatever. It's the whole world now. Everything is public access. But here's a kid doing his thing. I like this band. I don't like this one. And people are listening and they want to participate. And the Beastie Boys come to your bedroom to hang out, and it gets picked up by MTV, and that whole journey. You'll have to see the film to see what happens. But there were also some really important differences between the original influencer sitting next to me now and what it is today. And I think one of those differences is scale. You were speaking to pretty much, your local community, which happened to be New York City, which is not a small community.
It was New York City, and it was just like, hey, this might be cool in Paper magazine. That was, it wasn't like, I'm trying to globally dominate and then get into boxing.
Users and views and all this
if
shit.
there was some accountability there.
Yes.
They would see you on the subway.
Exactly.
You would maybe meet the people you were interacting with. Or
if I made fun of Michael Stipe, I would run into Michael Stipe, and then we'd become friendly or not. You had to face consequences.
But
you'd
have real conversations though.
Yeah.
It's not online.
No, it was not online.
Yeah.
Right.
Keyboard warriors.
Right.
Yeah.
Though I did have a post office box, and I would receive.
What's that?
No.
I would receive pictures of genitalia from men in the mail.
Early dick pics.
So yes, early dick pics.
The OG dick pics.
Which you have to.
That's a lot of work.
I admire the commitment.
Yeah, but you're a kid. Also.
It was fine.
Was it?
I was just like, they would take the time to black out their face, with a Sharpie. I also got really nice fun mail. And,
sure. Yeah. It balanced.
It balanced out.
Jake, were you always a part of this production, or was it something that there was a happy accident in your research, David, that you found him, or how did the connection work?
I was not living in the country in America in the 90s. So
awesome.
I didn't even know. Yeah. I didn't actually watch Squirt TV and didn't know about it because, my reference points with public access are like all 80s. And that was sort of when I was coming of age and in New York City, and following those weird open doors that, seeing different communities led me to. So I didn't know about Squirt TV. And it was actually our executive producer, Benny Safdie, and his crew,
Ronnie Bronstein,
Ronnie and Josh as well, who said, "Oh,
brothers,
we're big
You're
fans."
gonna do a documentary on public access. You gotta talk to Jake Fogelnest.
And he's really interesting. And
then David reached out, and I was like, okay, cool, you're doing a documentary on Manhattan Public Access, and obviously I trust Benny and have you talked to this guy? Like, I was asking David,
He
like,
interrogated me.
I did sort of interrogate you, but he had done everything like 100% right in by my estimation. He was like, and the way he wanted to make the film was exactly how I sort of envisioned this documentary looking, and he was able to track down the footage. And so I said, for the first time, I said, here, you can have my archives, you can have my participation, and I'll help in any way, because and I think by coincidence too, like I had seen some documentary work that you had done on like TV like 2 nights before with my wife, and I was like, oh, that was actually really well done. Something David did for like Hulu, and I was like, oh, I just watched something. So it was a confluence of the right time and the right people and the right director.
And Jake is sort of not only part of the story, but also, a sort of unofficial historian of public access, and taught me a lot. But, every door we opened another door. And so we're just really happy that, Jake's story kind of like encapsulated this big part of public access growing, becoming more influential, and starting to change mainstream media, and Wayne's World obviously being the biggest example of that. And
the thing with Wayne's World is like the sketch was a sketch on SNL, and then what happened in the movie happened to me in real life. With the
Tia Carrera.
No, but she's friends of a friend. But that's just my life. No, the idea that like a network would pick up a public access show, that's what they did. The difference was I was able to exert more creative control than Wayne and Garth.
Keep it in your bedroom.
Yeah, I kept it in. I said, we can't not film this in my bedroom, because that's literally the joke in Wayne's World. You'll look stupid, MTV. Which, by the way, terrible idea. Don't film something in your bedroom. It's just too many people. Had to wake up early.
Hot.
Yeah,
it's
hot.
Like no.
And
shoes.
And I feel so bad for my mother. She comes home from work, and like Cypress Hill is there. The place smells like weed.
Right.
It's just like. She didn't deserve that. But
Mom.
Yeah, but I took care of her.
Yeah.
I took care of her.
Good. Yeah.
One little side note before we start to wrap. Janine Garofalo.
Oh, yeah.
You had
Yes.
a little cameo. We've been obsessed with her. We saw her perform just last weekend at Cobb's Comedy Club, but she's hilarious and she's great. And speaking of 90s,
Janine
heroes of the 90s.
Yeah. She's the best. Janine was my history with Janine is it starts at Squirt TV. I was like a fan. I think I had a little crush on Janine.
Of course.
And she was on SNL at the time, and I went up to see the Beastie Boys at SNL, and then I think I did an interview with her, not for like Ray Gun magazine, but I think it was Bikini, like an off. She was like 90s stuff that nobody. But then I've known we stayed friends over the years, and 25 years ago, we were all out here at Sundance with a film called Wet Hot American Summer.
A little film.
A little film, which I was in, and then there's an ending to the film, which is pretty different, that they showed here at Sundance that they cut out. Thankfully, please don't go look it up on the DVD.
Well,
but then we did the Netflix shows, and I was a writer on the Wet Hot. So I've known Janine for my whole life, it seems.
Wow.
And she's the best.
Amazing.
And Cobb's is a great place to see comedy.
And
Right.
her comedy was just off the rails, and we loved every minute of it.
We were cackling.
Yes.
We were the loudest people in the room.
Yeah.
But anyways, yes. So we end every segment with this section we call This Bitch. And it's a moment for you to either throw shade on someone, an entity, whatever it is that's making you happy or pissing you off. So whoever wants to start and share with us who your This Bitch of the moment is.
putting me on the spot here because I have to make a moral decision of how I want to be in the world.
Yeah.
That's
It would
no, we've had this issue.
It would be so easy for me to be like, this bitch over here, you know, and but it would. Part of me wants to like be positive, so I'm gonna kick it to David.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, I
All right.
think
There's no wrong answer.
no.
Also,
All right.
we
So
get all
I'll
of
start with Shade. Our website and our email got hacked recently, and it just sent my life into chaos right when I was trying to come out to Sundance, and so I'm kind of down on Google. So that's my shade.
This bitch Google.
This bitch Google.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm probably gonna make it worse by saying that. But certainly, what was the opposite of shade?
Shine.
Shine.
Like something that's bringing you joy.
Shine. I just have to say Sundance 2026. Like, what an incredible feeling to be here. It's the final Sundance in Park City. I came here first when I was an intern in 1993 on a film, and it's just like such a place of film joy, and just this is where you want to kind of land and be up the mountain. So I'm going shine bitch Sundance.
I found a perfect answer that it does both at the same time. And it's another documentary film, which we have nothing to do with, but it's called Corey Feldman versus the World, which I'm being honest in that there are moments in this documentary that will remind you and give you the same joy and laughter that This Is Spinal Tap gives you. It is wild because it's a band on the road, and are they going to be okay? It's also simultaneously Corey Feldman, who seems to have no sense of self-awareness on a level that we should actually get him into a lab and study his brain. There is an earnestness in his. We talk about like honest misogyny. There's almost a childlike innocence that he has, and he is now disowning this documentary, and he's like, I don't know how they got the footage. Meanwhile, the documentarians are like, well, here's footage of us together where you're saying this is Marcy, she filmed the documentary, she's filmed it's a riot, and it may be my favorite film of 2025.
Okay.
Also the Smashing Machine and Marty Supreme, and but obviously those were good, but Corey Feldman versus the World. This bitch, you just gotta see this guy.
You gotta see this bitch.
And man, he does it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed this film.
Yeah.
Congratulations
Thank you
again.
so
We've been
much.
speaking to director David Shadrach Smith and subject Jake Fogelnest of the documentary Public Access. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Bitch Talkers. In this segment, we're talking about the U.S. documentary competition film. It's called Seized. We're here with the director, Sharon Leese. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Sharon, can you introduce our audience to your film?
Yes. So Seized takes place in a small town in Marion, Kansas. And this town got thrust into the international spotlight when the local police raided the local newspaper and the home of its co-owner. And the co-owner was a 98-year-old woman who died following the raids the next day.
Okay, so how did this story just fall into your lap? Because this is a multi-layered real story that happened to real people in real time also. So can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm really glad that you're talking about the people, because that really becomes the story. Because it seems like it's about a First Amendment or Fourth Amendment story, but it's about the people and how this happened. So I live in Kansas.
Where?
I live in Overland Park, Kansas.
My mom's from Kansas. So
Oh,
this
really?
Is, yeah. Anyways,
oh, wow.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm originally from New York, but I've lived in Kansas for years and years. And I heard about this story when I was driving in my car, and it was on NPR. And I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting and crazy that this is happening. But it's not my typical type of story to tell, because I usually tell the story from the inside out, from like an intimate story of some people or small place that no other filmmakers are trying to get into or try to get access to. And this story was in the national spotlight. So I was thinking, I'm not sure. I want to get in that scrum and, start competing to get this story. So, but then it kept haunting me because it kept coming up, and then the mom died. And I was like, okay, I have to do something. And I could drive there because I was only 2 hours away. So, and they didn't have any of their electronics because they had been seized. So I knew I sort of had a leg up on anybody else trying to get in there to do the story. So I drove there. I waited with journalists who wanted to talk to Eric, talk to him in between while journalists were coming in and interviewing him. And, he's a tried and true journalist.
Yes,
so he
he
said,
is.
you're the first one here, so you get the scoop.
Wow.
That's
Timing.
yes, timing is everything. On that note, while the story itself sells itself, I think the real star for me was Finn, who is our intern journalist coming from New York for a cute little year in Kansas. And just sort of the outsider perspective from now being on the inside, I thought that added so much texture, layers to the story. Can you talk about meeting him and him coming and being like, oh, okay, you're part of the story now?
Yeah, so the one of the reporters left right after the raids, and so they were down a reporter, and she was traumatized and said, "I can't do this anymore." And I knew that Eric was on the lookout for a new reporter. He also makes it a policy that you have to live in Marion to work there. So he didn't have that many candidates, and then Finn shows up, and I'm asking Eric all along, like, who's going to be the new person? Because I'm thinking, this could fold into the story somehow. So it took a year. And he did interview other people. And I talked to Eric on a Sunday, and I was just trying to figure out, like, what's going on for the week? What are we going to shoot next? And he said, well, tomorrow I have a new reporter from New York City who just graduated college coming in. I'm like, really?
The plot thickens.
Exactly. Yes. So being close was really an advantage, because I was able to, get a crew together really fast, and we went there that day. And I was really fortunate to be able to get him on his first day, because that's not something that you can't recreate it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't try to recapture it. So, so being there the first day was really essential. And then once I spent some time with him, I knew that he's going to be at the beginning of the story, because we're going to see the story unfold through his perspective and through how he is perceiving this town, because we as viewers are the same way. So he's kind of, So
the whole scene with Eric showing him how to use the phone, but also
we were laughing
but
together.
also maybe Finn doesn't know how to use the phone because of his age, like a landline phone.
Oh, exactly. He did not. I think that was the first time he ever used a landline phone. It was so fun to watch.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, I love the comedic moments in this film because
but
it's
Eric
heavy.
was not trying to be funny.
No,
but it is funny.
Was he trying to be funny?
No.
Oh,
yeah. He's like,
I don't think so.
He's like, you push this, and then everybody hears it.
Yeah.
It's just it's so good.
Yeah, he thought it was just cool. Maybe he thought it was like cool technology.
right. The old is new again. Yeah. I love that you got the scoop, and I love that Eric saw it in that way. But how did you gain their trust and the access? Because this is a film about trust and access, really.
Yes, exactly. And Eric, so he let me like we trusted each other because I didn't have an agreement with him right away that I could be the exclusive filmmaker of record to do this. But he said, you can come in and shoot and I'll get to know you. And and I was like trusting him that because there were other filmmakers trying to get in to do this, of course, because it's a really important story. So it took a while. I mean, he let me film. He actually let me take out my own iPhone the first day I was there because I didn't bring a crew, and so I shot a little bit that ended up in the film. But so it took a bit, and then and I was all settled with Eric and Finn, and it really wasn't until Finn was there, so like a year later, that we were able to gain the trust of the townspeople, and that trust had to be regained every time we got into Marion. So they were telling us for a year, though, while we were there, they would like shout from their cars or just tell us when we walked past them on the street, you don't know the other side of the story. You don't know the half of it. And we'd be like, tell us. And they were like, we don't want to tell you because it'll end up in the paper and, our name will be ruined. And we're like, that's not true. And people thought that Eric had paid us to do the documentary about him. So
fake news.
Exactly. So once we dispelled all that and we had the mayor sit down with us and he finally agreed to sit down, it was great because then he saw that we were really genuine and that we wanted to tell a panoramic view of the people in the town and not just focus on the paper and the egregious attack on the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment.
I think you do a great job of that because there were times when I was like, okay, maybe that's pushing the limits a little bit. Yep. I kind of get it, So I think you do a great job of telling all sides of the story. But also you get a sit down with both the mayor and Eric, who have had this contentious relationship. Was that hard for you to wrangle, or were they both like, okay, let's try this?
It was, it took a little bit. And, we were thinking about how are we going to end the film and how is there ever going to be any resolution or will there be any hope? And there were like inklings where like Mike Powers, the mayor, would kind of talk about maybe I want to talk to him about it. And Eric would sort of make these innuendos about, like maybe we should sit down. And so then I just asked one of our producers, Paul Manisowski, he talked to the mayor and he had a relationship with him and said, would you consider doing this? And he said, let me think about it. And he thought about it for a week. And I asked Eric, and Eric, he thought about it probably for a day and because he really wants to get the story out and he is really all about transparency. So he said, fine. And then Mike Powers said, okay. And then we didn't want it to be in like a cafe where they just happened to meet. We're like, we're going to put a card up and we're going to just, have that as a conceit that we asked them to do this because we think it's important.
Mm-hmm. And we'll do the interview in Switzerland and
exactly.
Everybody's neutral here.
Oh yeah, they didn't want it. We had to like propose different places, and then we came up with this school.
Oh, you weren't going to go to what's her name's restaurant?
Oh, her cafe.
That would have been totally safe. Yeah.
This film hit home because I've been working in a public radio news station in San Francisco for the last year and a half or so. And so I was part of a audio academy cohort, and we had to have newsroom days. And I'd been in a newsroom in TV before, so I kind of know how it works. But it was I hadn't been in a newsroom in a long time, and it is, at least where I was, it's changed a little bit because everyone's pitching their stories, and there are nuanced conversations around these news stories and questions about like, who is this about? Who is this for? Have you talked about, this, that, and the other? And as much as I love Eric and I love the way that he's just like, this is what I feel. This is the news. He's a fact checker, that's a whole thing. I have it in big letters, fact checking. I think people, if they're reading the news, they have to understand we're all fact checking. At least most of news stations, news entities are fact checking, and that's part of this work. But there are some times where I'm like, Eric, you could have had another conversation with someone else, maybe, or maybe had a nuanced conversation. But all this to say is, I think I got from your documentary that the people in Marion are so, not all, but most are still really distrustful of the news and where it comes from, even though Eric's a fact checker. He loves facts and he loves news. So can you talk about your conversations with those people and what's kind of like the thought now?
Yeah, and it's really important to understand the relationship between Eric and the paper.
And it's a small paper.
Yeah, it's a very small
I get
paper.
it, yes.
And the community, because it informs how the raids actually came about, because it wasn't just it has to do with things that were simmering for years and years, and the things that that people talk about with Eric. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of animosity toward him, and they are afraid of him. And he's a dogged, newspaper guy, like you saw and like you said. And what Finn allows us to do is to see and ask some questions, like maybe journalism could evolve a little bit. Maybe there's more than one way to tell a story and to investigate people and to report about them. So it's important in the documentary for us to be able to raise those questions. We're not giving the answer, but we really want people to think about that. And I think that the conversation between the mayor and Eric then kind of gives a little glimmer of hope, at least it did to me, that if people could talk about these things, maybe they can see that they're not as far apart as they feel like they are. So I think we definitely wanted it to be about small town journalism. And we wanted it to also be about like how should small town journalism be different than the New York Times.
I think the same can be said about filmmaking, and I think this film really benefited from you being at the helm, and you lived only 2 hours away. So you had an understanding of this community already going into it that some other filmmaker just wouldn't have. So can you talk about really understanding what you were getting into and how that made an impact on the film, if you can even... if you even noticed that.
Well, it's interesting because I do wonder about that. And people have asked me, do you think that you seemed like less of an outsider because you were only 2 hours away? And there is sort of a big difference between a small town in Kansas and when you're right outside Kansas City proper. So I still think I had a little bit of that, she's from the big town, she's from the big city, but we also, there's some common language and common culture. I mean, even as simple as something like the Kansas City Chiefs, if I was wearing a sweatshirt or a KU basketball t-shirt,
right.
Like sports was a real, kind of common ground, and we were sort of on the same team in that way. So I think that there were those kinds of things, and being able to just talk about how the weather was, how we all in August, how awful, we all felt, and, hearing the cicadas, and, so there definitely, I think it played a little bit of a role.
Well, I hate to say it, we have to wrap. So we have a ending segment. I don't know if you heard the other filmmakers. It's called This Bitch. So this bitch is either something that's bringing you joy or something that you just kind of want to throw shade on.
Okay, well, since we started out talking about my seized necklace that I got from my husband, who surprised me with this, I'll just say this bitch is my husband.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes. But you also said he gives you a gift for every film that you make. So this is
true.
And he also made you your smoothie this morning.
Yeah.
He's a real bitch.
Yeah, he is. He's my bitch.
Yes, he is.
All right, show off. Anyways, thank you so much. Again, we've been speaking with director Sharon Leese of the documentary Seized, which is in the U.S. documentary competition in Sundance 2026. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you so much. This was great.
This episode was supported by Dina Emerson and Anita Rodriguez. Thanks for joining us on today's show. You can find more information about this episode in our show notes.
If you're missing us, you can visit us at bitchtalkpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter and buy us a cup of coffee.
Did you know we're also on the radio? You can find us at bff.fm.
And lastly, rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All the cool bitches are doing it.